With 3 weeks to go, this election is still too close to call. In our series of interviews with a range of party leaders, tonight we hear from a leader who hopes to influence the next government and whose party claims to be the voice of Wales. But can Leanne Wood and Plaid Cymru really deliver? Well, good evening, Leanne Wood, and thank you very much for joining us. This election campaign is bigger than ever before, on a bigger stage for Plaid Cymru. How do you think it's going for you and the party?
I think it's going well. The leaders' debates have given us a platform that we've never had before to speak to millions of viewers, not just in Wales, but right throughout these islands. And I've been glad to have the opportunity in order to explain to people our platform of policies, because there are a range of policies in our manifesto that, were we to have an influence in the scenario of holding the balance of power, would benefit communities in parts of the UK outside of Wales as well. And
we'll come on to those policies in the manifesto here. We've seen you in the debates, very close to Nicola Sturgeon, but the SNP, they're on fire, aren't they?
Yes, Scotland is a different country to Wales, of course, and the experience that people have gone through in Scotland as a result of the referendum campaign has invigorated Scottish politics in a very interesting way, and that hasn't happened in Wales or anywhere outside of Scotland.
Right. Why are they doing so well and Plaid Cymru isn't?
Well, they took control of a minority government back in 2007. That was the beginning of the SNP's success story. They proved to the Scottish people that they could run a government well, and people gave them a majority in 2011, and then they went on to put forward the manifesto. We've had nothing like the same scenario.
If we go back to 99, you were polling better than them. In terms of share of the vote in the Assembly elections, you did pretty well. You hit a very high 28%, didn't you, in 99? SNP, 28% as well in the Scottish Parliament. If you look at the Euros, you outpolled them. You were doing better than them in 99. What's gone wrong?
Well, that just shows where we can get back to if we focus and are able to convey to people in Wales the messages that we've got to build this country, to get us to the prosperity that we know that we can achieve here in Wales.
Yeah, but I wonder why devolution as a vehicle, as the thing you really wanted, has delivered for the SNP. They've made the most of it and they've grown. They're heading for 40, 50 seats. Now, back in 99, you had 4 MPs. They had 5. You might have 3 this time. You might be lucky to keep those 3. You might have 4. They're looking at 40, 50. You know, devolution has delivered for them. It hasn't. You've gone backwards.
Well, I think it's the referendum campaign that's marked the big change in Scottish politics. They had 6 MPs after the last election.
All driven by the SNP.
Well, of course, you're right. But the fact that people have been... there's been a democratic revolution, effectively, in Scotland. People are engaged to an extraordinary level. And people are really keen to ensure that they get a say in shaping the way that their society is run. And the referendum campaign opened the door to that, and that feeling hasn't gone away. Now, what I want to do is get Wales into the same place. Now, I'm not saying that we can do that tomorrow. There are grave challenges in our economy which we have to put right and show people in Wales that we can put it right. But I really do believe that here in Wales we could have a similar conversation about where we want to go, and when we do that we'll see similar levels of engagement among people here too.
But what I'm trying to get at is that they've built on it. They've got the momentum going from devolution as the party of independence. That's what they are. It's very clear. Plaid Cymru, perhaps, in your narrative, Plaid Cymru is maybe the party of dependence. You want more money from England, you want more money from Europe. It's all about the dependency culture. It's not about standing on our own 2 feet. You haven't built that narrative, have you, as a party?
It is absolutely about getting to the point where we can stand on our own 2 feet and ending once and for all our dependence. I don't want Wales to be reliant on handouts from Brussels or from London, but we've been disadvantaged financially for such a long time. Ever since the Barnett formula was invented, we've been disadvantaged year on year. Now, in order to get to that point of being able to stand on our own 2 feet, that's going to be very difficult if our financial disadvantage continues. And that's why we're calling for parity with Scotland, not just in terms of resources, but also in terms of powers, so that we can end our third-rate devolution settlement and get on the road to turning our economy around, using the powers under the devolved system in order to do that.
Parity with Scotland, that is your big mantra, isn't it? And yet they put so much more into the coffers in terms of their tax take than we do. So why should Wales have as much as Scotland? They put in much more in terms of the percentage than we do.
But that's got nothing to do with the way in which the Barnett formula is formulated or the way in which Wales gets its money. The Barnett formula was locked in for Scotland as a result of the vow that was given by the three-party leaders ahead of the referendum. That's changed the game completely in terms of Wales's funding, and my argument is that Wales deserves parity with Scotland, and I've heard no good argument for justifying why we don't deserve that additional cash.
OK, but we put in about 16 billion in terms of our taxes into the coffers. Public spending here is 30 billion. So we do quite well, don't we? We need to increase our tax take in order to have this parity with Scotland.
You're absolutely right. We need to increase our tax take. We need to create more jobs that pay well, and that's why we're putting forward policies like raising the minimum wage up to the living wage, and to increase employment by changing the way that public services are procured by the public sector from the private sector, and also our policies for bringing more businesses out of business rates, because we believe that if they are freed up from that extra finance, then they could be encouraged to take on an extra member of staff. So all of these are policies which are designed to create jobs in order to get more money into the tax pot.
Right.
But the crucial question...
At the moment, it's all about getting money from England, isn't it? It's all about this £1.2 billion that you want from the Treasury. Extra money, please give it to us. You make a big play of the fact that being part of the European Union is worth £40 for each person in Wales. It's all about, please give us more money. It's not about standing up on our own and concentrating on growing wealth here.
That's what we have to do, there's no doubt about that, and that's why we've put forward these proposals to create jobs and stimulate economic growth. You're absolutely right, but to try to get to that point where we can stand on our own 2 feet is going to be very, very difficult to do that while we have our hands tied behind our backs with an unfair and disadvantaged financial settlement.
Let's focus on the 1.2 billion then. Where's it going to come from?
It'll come from the general taxation pot, the fund that comes from Westminster, the Treasury Fund, and we want to end austerity as well, of course. And if we were to go ahead with our proposals, which are, you know, very measured proposals to increase departmental spending by just 0.5%, then communities right across the UK would benefit from that.
Let's look. You're asking for extra money at a time when everybody's talking about cuts, except a few parties, including yours, of course. Debt is 1.5 trillion.
And growing.
The deficit, it's growing, actually, yeah. 3 billion while we're on air.
Yes.
3 million while we're on air. Now then, you're a working mum, you do the weekly shop, you live within your means. I mean, you say austerity as if it's a swear word. I mean, it's all about living within your means, isn't it? And you probably do that when doing the weekly shop, don't you?
Yes, and running a household is very different to running a government. A government has a number of responsibilities, and making sure the citizens have work and are able to have livelihoods is a key responsibility of government. And what we're saying is not that we don't want the deficit to be closed or that we don't want debt to come down.
You want to increase it. You want an extra 1.2 billion. You want to increase the deficit, don't you?
We want to invest in order to bring more money into the tax pot. And
you acknowledge, if Wales were to get that £1.2 billion, the deficit would increase. That's what you're asking for.
Well, under our plans, the deficit would be decreased over time.
When?
Well,
no timescale.
By 2020, we will have reduced it significantly.
How much?
Down to 2% of GDP. And we can...
And how would you do that?
Well, by making cuts and raising taxes from people who can afford to pay them. At the moment...
But that's not enough to close the deficit, is it?
Well, we could raise...
90 billion we're talking about.
Well, we could raise £10 billion by changing national income contributions so that those who pay the most pay at the same level of basic rate taxpayers. We could raise another £10 billion by removing the tax relief on the higher rate pensions. We could raise billions by scrapping the Trident replacement system and by re-employing those HMRC staff
exactly,
that were...
Yeah, with Trident, you often mention Trident, 100 billion, but it's over 30 years, isn't it? We're talking 3 billion a year here. And the knock-on for Wales, if it were to be divvied up, you're talking, what, 180,000 a year? It's nothing. It's nothing. You know, Trident would not be this panacea, 180 million. I mean,
on its own, you're right, it wouldn't close the gap. But as part of a wider package, which would also include cracking down on tax avoidance and tax evasion as well, then it can form part of the overall picture. And I can't see how it can be justified that we spend £100 billion, no matter over how many years we're talking, on weapons of mass destruction that in all likelihood would never ever be used, when we have people needing hospital services, education services, and the services that our local authorities provide.
You say overall you're going to cut the deficit, even though you've got a big shopping list. Let's look. Living wage for everybody in Wales by 2020. Now, a lot of those workers will be in the public sector. How much would that cost?
Well, if everybody was to have the living wage, it would take 250,000 Welsh workers out of poverty wages, and it would actually raise more money into the tax pot. And let me explain why. Because, first of all, the in-work benefits that people claim because of poverty wages would no longer need to be paid out. And the additional tax take from people earning more money, it would raise around between £2 and £3 billion a year. So the living wage is something that would actually benefit the Treasury.
OK. You also talk in your manifesto about an extra year of schooling for 3 to 4-year-olds. How much would that cost?
In a region of about £150 million is the cost of that, and that would have to come out of the Welsh budget. And of course, we've seen a 10% cut to the Welsh budget. And it was interesting, just last night on the televised debates, I challenged the leader of the opposition to pass an emergency budget to end the Tory cuts that are planned for this current financial year. That means about a £200 million cut to the Assembly budget. Now, if that emergency budget were to be passed, then there would be extra cash to the Assembly for these all-important priorities like childcare, which of course have an economic impact as well.
Right, you scrap the bedroom tax. 470 million that would cost for the UK, wouldn't it?
Yes, about 10 million for Wales.
Right. You wouldn't raise the pension age. How much would that cost?
Well, our living pension proposals would cost in the region of about £10 million, and they would be paid for by cutting the tax rate to higher earner pensioners that I mentioned earlier. You're spending a lot of money
here, aren't you? And you're promising to get the deficit down by 2020.
Well, what we're doing is talking about investing to raise more money into the tax pot. Now, Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman has talked about the UK being obsessed with the elimination of the deficit, while studies show that for every pound that you spend in terms of infrastructure investment, £3 is brought back into the economy. So I don't accept that this idea of public spending is just spending.
So you don't want to get rid of the deficit? That's not your priority?
We want to see the deficit closed, come down, but we're not prepared to put an artificial deadline on eliminating it completely at all costs, because that means that public services will be damaged and people risk losing their jobs.
OK, let's leave the so-called dependency culture then, this 1.2 billion that you want to come into Wales. Let's talk about wealth creation here and about attracting big business here. Are you comfortable with big businesses moving in?
Yes, we need to have a strategy for big business to come into Wales, but that can't be the entire sum of our strategy. And I think where we've made a mistake in the past is by overemphasising the inward investment strategy. I used to work in the Bosch factory. That attracted an awful lot of public money, and yes, it employed people while it was here. But because wages were cheaper elsewhere, they upped sticks and left. And it didn't just affect the people who were working in that factory, it affected the supply firms around as well.
Your priority is not the Admirals, the Amazons, you know, the big names that are coming to Wales and creating jobs, you know,
course.
Airbus, you know, these big names.
Of course, they're vitally important to the
We don't
Welsh...
hear you talk a lot about them, do we?
Well, they're vitally important to the Welsh economy, but our argument is that there's been an overemphasis on attracting inward investment firms in the past. We can't build the Welsh economy on the basis of low wages. We have to do something different, and there are models elsewhere by using the resources that we have ourselves to improve our own situation.
Now, we know you're in favour of redistribution of wealth. You're a socialist. That is your passion. That's your conviction. So I just wonder if you're morally uncomfortable with rich people.
I'm not morally uncomfortable with rich people at all. We need to have people who are rich because they pay, or they should pay, more in taxes into the tax pot. And without people paying into the tax pot and creating the wealth, then we have no public sector at all.
Do you want more of them in Wales?
Yes, I do want more of them in Wales, because I want more people to be able to help us create jobs. But I also want to invest in those kinds of firms that invest their profits back into the company as well. So we've put forward, for example, having a government-owned arm's-length energy company in order to provide cheaper bills for people.
Yeah, but just back to the rich people, one way of getting more companies into Wales would be to lower the top rate of tax for well-off people. Now, if there is the devolution of income tax, we don't want to get into that, but if it comes, why not lower it? Adam Price within your own party suggested that. Why not do that to get the economy going?
There is an ongoing debate about this within Plaid Cymru and in wider society. But of course, the aim has to be to maximise the resources in the tax pot. And we don't have tax raising powers yet. We have no idea what the state of economy, the state of the economy will be like when we get them. So in order to, for us to put out our tax policy now on income tax powers that we don't even have would be a little bit premature, I'd suggest.
So you wouldn't rule out lowering them?
Well, it's a debate that we need to have, I'd say. There are other alternatives and other ways of maximising your resources in the tax pot, and that has to be your aim.
And I go back to, you know, we know you well as an advocate of fairness, of social justice, the valleys, communities. Is it a bit of a nostalgic view of Wales that you have? We don't see Leanne pushing forward the cities and the dynamos that will really invigorate the Welsh economy.
I try to speak on behalf of all communities in Wales, be that our city communities, our valley communities, those in the north and the middle of the country as well, of course. But different communities have different challenges, and there is a lot of investment in our cities, or there has been in the past anyway. Of course, there could always be more. But when you have a situation whereby your one part of the country is doing very well and other parts are not doing so well, there's a real danger of replicating the same model that we have on the UK state basis, where London and the South East overheats to the detriment of other parts of the UK.
Let's talk briefly then about immigration. Should we have more immigration into Wales?
In some key sectors, yes, we probably should. There are some jobs and skills that we need. And for example, we've got a shortage of doctors in the health service. We've got fewer doctors per head of the population here in Wales than many other EU countries. And part of the reason for Labour's insistence on ploughing ahead with its centralisation programme is a shortage of doctors. And one of the reasons for the shortage of doctors is a rule that was brought in under the previous Labour government to restrict doctors coming from the Indian subcontinent.
Yeah, and you said that last night, and some people have expressed a bit of surprise. They're trained in India, and you're going to nab them.
Well, of course,
India need those doctors.
Doctors are needed in India as well, and we do need to train enough doctors to meet our own needs here, but it takes a long time to train a doctor. So in the interim, it makes sense for us to do what we can to raise the numbers of doctors we have here in Wales. In some communities...
That's not socially just, though, is it? I mean, have you told India, you know, produce more doctors for Wales?
No, and you make a fair point about India's needs. There's no doubt about that. But there are people who want to come here to gain valuable experience and then go back home to treat the home populations. But the point is, we don't have enough doctors. There's a level of denial about that from the Welsh Government, but the impact of that means that services are being removed from people's homes.
Yes, and every party in this election is promising more doctors, so you won't be unique on that. let's talk about the deal then.
Well, I think we're actually the only party that's putting forward a concrete plan, a costed plan
you're right.
to
They would all
introduce
say
1,000 doctors into the Welsh NHS.
Yeah, and some are offering 8,000 across the UK and so forth. Let's come to the deal then, because this is what this election is all about for you, closing a deal. You've promised to really be there at the top table. How are you going to do that? If you don't get this 1.2 billion, and in the 2 debates now, Ed Miliband has looked you in the eye and said, no, it's not available, where's the deal?
I was disappointed to see the leader of the opposition effectively close the door on the ability to provide an alternative government to this deeply damaging Tory-led government. And let's be under no illusion. There's a risk that under the worst-case scenario, after this election, there could be a UKIP-Tory coalition. And there was an offer on the table last night to the leader of the opposition to come together with other progressive parties to put an alternative to that. Now, I asked him to put forward an emergency budget which would end Tory cuts. Yes, but he's closing the door, and it's a very irresponsible thing to do.
There won't be a deal. You won't be there at the top table. You won't get your 1.2 billion. You won't be there, and you've closed the door on the Tories. So Plaid Cymru, let's be honest, you're not going to be at the top table, are you?
I don't accept that. There's every chance that there'll be a hung parliament after this election. We don't know
but you want your 1.2 billion, or would you be there without it?
Well, we want to achieve parity of resources for Wales.
And he's not going to give it to you.
We also have a number of other priorities. The point is, if he wants to be Prime Minister, and if he's serious about wanting to end and stop another Tory government, then he has every opportunity to do that.
Yes, but let's get down to detail here. You want the 1.2 billion. He's saying no. You've closed the door on David Cameron. He might offer it, but you've closed the door already there.
People in Wales would not accept Plaid Cymru or any other party doing a deal with the Conservatives. People in Wales have never trusted the Tories or given them a mandate to rule over us. So part of what we want to achieve in this election is ending Tory rule. But let's make it clear as well, I'm not prepared to prop up a Labour government implementing Tory policies either.
OK, just on dealing with the Tories, you will not do a deal with the Conservative Party in Wales after the Assembly elections?
That's correct, we won't.
No way.
No.
You're promising to be First Minister. You need the Tories to make... They're the only party who can make you First Minister.
That's not true. I don't accept the premise of your question at all there. We're in a different era of politics now. Gone are the days where majority government is the only way to, or a coalition government even, is the only way to run things. Just take a look at Scotland and the way that Scotland was governed after 2007. The SNP government ran a minority government there, and yes, they worked with others in order to get their legislation and budgets through, but they were a minority government operating in their own right.
So no deal with the Tories in Westminster, definitely no deal with the Tories in Cardiff Bay next year. You're hoping for a minority government. That's how you will be First Minister.
Well, we work with others, but not the Tories, and we certainly wouldn't work with any UKIP Assembly members.
Liberals, then?
Yes, potentially, yes.
So you do a deal with the Liberals, because you can't do a deal with Labour, can you?
It's unlikely that we would go into coalition with Labour in the future, but we are very serious about getting to the point where we can run the government in Wales, because let's face it, we've talked already about the economic problems that this country has faced, and we've had the Labour government in control since the birth of devolution in one form or another. And if we're to break the logjam, and if we are to do things differently in Wales, we have to have a different government.
Right. Let's go back to these negotiations and the Westminster government then. 3 MPs, and 1.2 billion pounds, that's what, £400,000 per vote. You're putting a big price, aren't you?
Well, you're assuming we're only going to get 3 MPs after this election.
If you're 4, then what will you be? 300 million?
Well, it depends.
Per vote. They'll go to the DUP, they'll go to the SDLP, they're cheaper.
It depends on the numbers. We don't know what the vote will produce yet. We have to wait until people have their say. It's looking very likely that neither of the 2 main parties have done enough to win the trust of people and convince them to govern alone. So those parties will be looking for partners.
What I'm trying to get at is, will you compromise on that 1.2 billion? Or is that it? Unless you get that for Wales, which has been your mantra throughout this campaign, you can't go to the top table, can you?
We've got a number of priorities that have been set out for this election. The 1.2 billion is clearly very important to us. It was disappointing last night to hear the Leader of the Opposition refuse to
I'm trying to get it. You know, you're not going to get it, let's be honest. You're not going to get it. There's austerity. He said twice to you on television, no. You're not going to get it, are you?
One thing is absolutely clear. If you don't ask for something, you will definitely not get it. Now, it was clear from last night that there's only one way that we will solve Wales's financial disadvantage, and that is with a strong team of Plaid Cymru MPs. And the more MPs that we get, the more chance that we have of winning that £1.2 billion for Wales.
OK, and you will be at the top table?
That is the aim, definitely.
When will Wales be independent?
I can't answer that question, I'm afraid, because that is a matter for the people in Wales. When people are ready, when people can see that our economic situation is one that is feasible, then people will be ready for that discussion. But now, I think what I would say to people is that even if they don't support Wales becoming an independent country, then surely they can support us getting to the point where we can have that proper debate like they did in Scotland.
And when will you be the real Party of Wales? You know, the biggest Party of Wales, like the SNP is in Scotland?
Well, we're working on becoming the biggest party in the 2016 Assembly elections.
Because UKIP's bigger than you now.
For now, UKIP seem to be polling quite well. We'll see how they do on election day, because that is the real poll at the end of the day. They seem to be losing a little bit of the support that they built up ahead of the European elections. And they have a very simple and effective message, which is all about pulling out of the EU. And if you listen to what they say, then all of our problems would be solved by sending all immigrants back home. But we know it's not as simple as that. Life is much more complex, and I'm confident that when we face the electorate ahead of the Assembly elections and we explain...
You've got to do better than them.
Right. Well, we will do better than them,
and you've had a go at Nigel Farage in these debates, and your profile, no doubt, has gone up in these debates. And your likeability ratings, you're doing really well in those on social media. People want to have ice creams with you. You're the favourite one in terms of that. Is that enough as a leader, though? Because you were appointed, weren't you, as a firebrand? And I just wonder if leadership has tamed you a bit.
Well, we've got 3 weeks to take our message out to communities in Wales, and I go about all over the country, and the feedback that I get from people is that we've used effectively the opportunity and the voice and the platform that we've been afforded as a part of this election.
Leanne Wood, who said Mrs Windsor, where's she gone?
Well, she's still here. I'm still exactly the same person that I've always been. Well, I'm the leader of a political party now, and I speak on behalf of my membership, and I have to temper my remarks in that sense. But, you know, my views are the same as they've always been, and I do feel that I feel very strongly in favour of equality, and I would really like every child in Wales to be able to aspire to be the head of state. Why not?
Now, finally, you're a feminist, you're a socialist, you're a nationalist, you're a Republican. If you had to choose one of those words, which would it be?
I don't think I can choose one of those words, really. I mean, there's a lot of ist words there, and there are other words that you could use to describe me as well. I'm not able to pick one, to rank one over the other, I think. They all form part of my political makeup.
Leanne Wood, thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch.